So within the last few years, I think it's safe to say that we've reached a rather weird time in our social development and what we perceive to be social standards or responsibilities. And for the most part, a lot of this speaks for itself. But what I really wanted to hone in on with this webinar today is, how we've gotten to a point where we've essentially started to demonize effort and working hard and having drive and vigor and pushing for what you want and, dare I say, exhausting yourself to get what you want. But this is something that you can call cliche, call it bullshit, or call it whatever you want. But this concept of self-preservation and refusing to push yourself or being hesitant to push yourself for things is something that I will always patently disagree with. I think it's important to understand that we're owed nothing, and beyond common courtesy and basic decency, nobody or nothing in the world owes us shit. It's really our responsibility to cater to our own desires and provide our own needs, and we really need to get away from this mantra of always looking outward for somebody else to solve our problems. I just think that it's a really unfortunate way that a lot of people end up adopting to live their lives, because it seems almost as if they just don't know any better. And once again, that's something that will just never really apply to me. Furthermore, unless you're blessed with elite gifted genetics, which if you're listening to this talk, I can all but assure you you're not. Again, it's your responsibility to get comfortable having to work hard for what you want. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of be in the passenger seat, for the better part of your time here. Sweat equity is a theme that's personal to me. This is something that I've tried to live pretty close to for the last 10 years or so. And when I think about sweat equity, I think of two things really. The first one being equity, and equity to me means equitable. So in other words, what we're putting into something, there should be some sense of reciprocity or return on our efforts. As for sweat, this is the great equalizer. This is one of very few things that just about anybody in the world, has an equal opportunity towards. And for me, this is something that a lot of people can relate to, but I've always viewed myself as being, good enough at most things, but never really being great at anything. And so for me, I always have had to really work that much harder to cover deficits, for the sake of competition or for the sake of earning jobs or earning promotions or anything like that. I just always feel like I've always had to work harder for it. So with this webinar, obviously, we're going to be going in a little bit of a different direction, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. Now, don't worry, this isn't going to be, some rah-rah shit where I just sit back and talk about all the things that I've done or overcome. I do want to have some, tangible insight and or applications that are provided throughout this, but I will be sharing some personal background and kind of discussing some things that have happened, over the last 10 years for me and kind of where I've been and where I'm at. But ultimately, I really want to express the point that you really should not buy into this culture of demonizing working hard and pushing yourself for things, because speaking from my own personal experience, if I didn't bust my ass with what I do, then I can assure you, I just wouldn't have anything that I do in my life as it is, and it would be a totally different avenue for me. So this ultimately boils down to we are what we repeatedly do. And I think this is another one that is very simple to understand in concept, but when you put it to action, it can be a little bit more difficult. But before we dive into what we really have for this today, I do need to start out with some quick disclaimers here. So as with any of my content, but particularly with this one, it's important that I mention that nothing that's included in this presentation is representative or a reflection of any of my employers, any of my governing bodies or certification organizations, or anybody else that I have affiliation with. Everything in this webinar is 100% exclusive to me and myself. I will also mention that there's going to be likely a good bit of profanities and explicit language in this one. Frankly, I'm not really even motivated to apologize for it, but just wanted to note that this is probably not going to be a good one to listen to without headphones or in the gym or with kids around or anything. But I'll try to do my best for you. And lastly, along with sharing some personal background and my personal story, this will be a very raw and authentic discussion. We're not really going to edit this. I'm just going to kind of shoot from the hip on this and kind of see where it goes. But I did want to mention, please understand that I do not mean to demean, delegitimize, or offend anyone, on a personal sense or in practice or in belief. Nor am I suggesting that what I have to offer in this is by any stretch of the means the only way to do things. This is just simply what has worked for me and what I have developed to become kind of my core beliefs. But go ahead and throw your scuba gear on, because we will be getting a little bit deeper in this one than normal. So to start it off, this will be the central theme for our talk today, and that is you are nothing more or less than the collective decisions that you've made over time within the circumstances and environments that you've been placed in. So it's incumbent on you to take full responsibility of your current situation and take full ownership of your own future. So at 23, I set out on a 10-year plan. And that 10-year plan was very simply to accomplish more in the next decade than it takes most people to do in 25 years. And despite the ambiguity to that, it was vital for me at the time to just shut my mind off and just fucking go. I was coming out of a really low point in my life, from 19 to 23, give or take. Shit just got really messy for me, and most of it was self-induced. I had a really tough time adjusting into becoming my own person. And what that ultimately led to was being kicked out of college for being academically ineligible, being fired from work for being a drunk, really. I missed the shift on Sunday morning. I was bartending, but I missed the shift because I was passed out in the back seat of my car in the parking lot at work from the night before. On top of that, I just had a bad breakup. I distanced myself from almost all of my family. I ruined a couple of really strong friendships or personal relationships. And I just kind of completely, sequestered myself. And again, it was a combination of poor preparation, poor development, and just really poor decision making on my part. But I went through a pretty extensive battle with depression and some mental health shit, and the combination of everything and the timing of everything, really just made it probably more than it really was for me. But ultimately, I'm extremely thankful for this period of my life because, like I said, by the time I reached 23 and I had really truly hit that rock bottom point, I had finally gotten the message and got my shit together a little bit. But I had to earn back everything that I had fucked up, and I had to kind of put all of the pieces back together. So I'd started kind of developing some momentum, and I was starting to kind of get my feet back under me, and I had applied to 44 places back in 2013. And of those 44, I mean, it wasn't just gym shit. I mean, Applebee's and Best Buy and anything. And only 2 places called me back, one of which was one of the One Lights down here in the Hampton Roads area. So I had a friend of mine taking me to and from work and getting me to and from interviews and whatnot. And I lied about having a certification, and thankfully somehow I ended up getting hired at One Life, but it would be a pivotal step for me. Fast forward a couple of months, and I think I have my rhythm back, and I come home one day, and there's an eviction notice on the door. And, I just broke down and kind of crumbled in that moment. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? I thought I was doing the right things, making the right choices, and so on and so forth. And, sometimes it just is what it is. So I came home a couple of days later, and I'm, processing where I'm going to go and how I'm going to, navigate this eviction thing, because there was no shot in hell I was going, back home. And I got a letter from my grandmother, and I opened the letter, and it was just very simply a purple sticky note. And the sticky note just said, hope all is well. Best of luck. We love you. XOXO. And beneath that sticky note, there was a check for $2,000. That $2,000 ended up quite literally saving my life at the time. It allowed me to be able to reverse the eviction. I was able to keep my apartment, obviously keep the job, and then things kind of started to formulate back from there. But I spent a long time broke and depressed and being a degenerate and making bad decisions and fucking up relationships. And I feel like, just about any fundamental life mistake you can make, I did it, and I squeezed it into about a 3-year gap. And it taught me a lot. Currently I'm in year 8 of this 10-year plan. And it's pretty cool that I'm actually ahead of trajectory, based on what I had initially set out for. And over the time, I've experienced some incredible things. And, there's no way I could talk about this without mentioning my amazing wife, Nicole, and how much of an instrumental factor she has been along the way for getting me back up onto my feet. She was able to pay me back into college to get all the classes taken that I needed to become eligible to graduate. And then thereafter, I was able to somehow sneak into a master's degree, and none of that would have occurred without her. Not to mention all the emotional stability and the support that she's provided along the way as well. But sitting here in year 8, it's as exciting as it is that we've covered so much ground. It's also that light at the end of the tunnel starting to kind of, broaden, and I'm seeing the end point, and it's frightening. It's crazy how fast time has traveled, but I think, with where I'm at now, I'm in a really fortuitous position to not only continue to pursue what I personally value and want to do, but I think that I'm also starting to reach a point where I have a big enough of a platform to where I can start to share some of these things and hopefully help people who have been in similar situations. With this, this webinar, I'm going to kind of document or detail, some of these events that have happened along the way for me, and really how I was able to navigate them in the moment, but then on the back end, seeing the bigger picture of things and what it's meant to me to, overcome and pursue things. And I think that if I've done anything well at all, it's that I've done a very good job of maintaining my self-awareness and staying, relentlessly committed to what I'm pursuing. And that's this shield right here. Everything that I do, every morning that I wake up, it's one of the first things on my mind, that one day I will be the head strength coach for the Las Vegas Raiders, and everything that I'm doing in the meantime needs to in some way, shape, or form contribute to that bigger picture. So in this, hopefully I can share some things that are of value to you, and hopefully I can get you thinking a little bit. But I think that there's some good material in here that should resonate. So everything for me really starts with perspective and introspection. And I define introspection as spending designated time to figure out who you are not, while establishing what you will not settle for, and identifying loosely what drives you. So with this, introspection for me is, basically being your own third-party observer. You are taking time to analyze not just where you are or what you do or what you have, but really who you are. And it's absolutely vital to spend, at least some amount of time kept to yourself and doing so deliberately. But you have to establish an intrinsic understanding of yourself. And I think it's also equally important to investigate the unknown and tap into some of those things that we know live deep within, but we tend to package them away, compartmentalize them, or just avoid them altogether or entirely. But nevertheless, we need to be very thorough and honest with ourselves. And I think it's a critical factor, especially for young adults, to do this, carve out time to do it before you immerse yourself in environments that are, constantly populated or infiltrated by others. You're always taking other people's impressions and advice and insights, and you never really formulate your own. And that can be a dangerous way of living. In addition to that, you want to identify what your strengths and weaknesses are, and you need to, again, look at things with impartiality and objectivity. But from there, if we look at the 3 boxes listed here, I always start with removing the distractions and just disconnecting yourself from things that aren't feeding what you're trying to do. Now, this can be in a bigger sense or in a bigger scale, with relationships, close friendships, family members, And then it can be the smaller or more mundane things, how much time you're spending on social media or your phone, how much time you're spending watching TV. But in either case, we want to try to remove external reliance. And you don't need to, or you shouldn't want to validate from anywhere within. So if you're somebody who constantly needs to, quote unquote, shut your mind off, or if you need to just keep yourself distracted, then there's something bubbling down within that you're just not attending to and not letting it build, right? You're just consistently trying to avoid what you don't want to discuss with yourself. From there, we want to try to reduce the amount of decisions. This is one of the absolute benefits of being broke or being a fuck up, is that, if you cut off enough things in your life, or if you don't have the means or the funds to do so many things, it pretty much pigeonholes you into what you do have. So it's a very good way to fast track identifying what you want versus what you need. And for me, I'm going to fight for what I want, and I'll be willing to die for what I need. Removing what's unnecessary. This is another one that seems simple, but really can become difficult. So again, I'm going to mention this a million times, but being honest, impartial, and objective when you're going through this stratification process is non-negotiable. And then finally, we want to refine our destination, and we'll talk more on this in a second. But like I mentioned, you have to understand what you're not before trying to establish who you are. So for me, I didn't really know that I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach early on. I just knew I would rather be stripped butt naked and dragged over broken glass than sit at a desk from 8 to 4 and listen to somebody bark orders at me. It was never going to happen. So what I encourage everybody is to just envision what your definition or version of perfect is, and then just start to work yourself backwards from there. So once you've declared who you are not, then you open up the time to start to figure out who you are. And this is a little phrase that I started kind of saying to myself somewhat recently here, but if you don't have your heart in something, just don't put your hands on it. And again, this can go for relationships, school, family, work, whatever the case may be. But if you don't have passion for what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult for you to do things well or with proficiency or value. I think about it as letting the skills lead the way and then having your heart connect the dots, right? So you don't need to be a robot, and it doesn't need to be completely binary. But if you start out with, okay, what am I good at? Then you can start to create some momentum with it, and then you can see some impact that you're having or some return on investment, and that is going to naturally drive your attachment or connection to it. But you cannot fall into the pattern of committing to things out of pressure, social pressure, family pressure, relationship pressure. You can't fall victim to being guilted into things, or just simply doing things for others' satisfaction or demand. I'm probably a little bit more rigid on this than most, but you have to be comfortable standing your ground on things and saying, when you're not comfortable with something, or when you just don't simply have interest in doing something. But remember that everything that you do is voluntary. It's just a matter of cost versus risk analysis, right? We think that it's mandatory to show up to work on time. We think that it's mandatory to go to college. We think that it's mandatory to be married by 30, and all these other things and social status expectations that we've lived by, but really they're not true. Showing up to work on time is a voluntary decision. You just have to be understanding of the consequences that if you show up late to work multiple times, they're going to fire your ass. Is that worth it to you? But this is probably the number one thing or problem that I observe, with young adults or with people in my peer group, is that they just feel obligated to all these different things, and it just basically evaporates any time that they have for themselves to manifest anything or invest their time how they want to. Path, duration, and outcome. So this is a concept that I stole from two individuals, really, one of which most of you might be familiar with. That's Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's I'm pretty sure the smartest fucking person on the planet. And then another guy, Rich Diviney, who's actually somebody that I know personally, but he just published a phenomenal book titled The Attributes, which I would definitely encourage you to check that out. I'll throw a link in the caption box here. But what they talk about with this is path, duration, and outcome are ultimately the three fundamental priorities of the brain. Very simply, where am I going? How long will it take? And is this going to be worth it? So for us, This is where the more clarity that we have on these three things, the less dissonance that we're going to travel with. And I think for all intents and purposes, you want to create your loose definitions of what success means, what value means, what outcome means to you before you start to try to measure it or analyze it. But very simply, if we look at path, what are the different routes that I have? How difficult is this navigation going to be? What am I going to be expected to endure or withstand? On the duration side, how can I become more efficient? You want to be economical with your time. You want to be economical with how you travel and move and traverse things. And who are you going to surround yourself with? That is a vital component to this as well. Nobody can do this shit all by themselves. So you need to be selective with who you have as company along the way. And then as for outcome, what is this all for? What's the return on investment? How many sacrifices am I going to make in the short term for a return on the long end? What matters most to me? What do I feel like is the most impactful or significant thing that I can contribute back to the world with what I do or what I'm capable of? From there, we then take a look at direction, and this is a common adage here, but while the journey of 1,000 miles may begin with a single step, I think it's important not to forget to identify the destination for too long. And this is something that is woefully common in young adults in their early 20s, where we have this fear mongering of making a commitment or identifying what we want to do as if it's written in blood and we can't ever call an audible. Very little in life is irreparable or unforgivable. But the longer that you spend time on things that don't connect, the harder it will ultimately become to fuse them. So you want to try to create some aggregation and momentum and, start to build in exponential growth. And the only way that you can do that is to continually refine as you're going along what it is you do, who it is you are, and what it is you're trying to accomplish. So if we look at the two graphics here, each being an arbitrary 1,000 miles here, you want to try to get your generalizing out of the way early. This is where we have a broad spectrum. We're interested in a lot of different things. We may go this way, we may go that way, and we're just kind of trying shit out and seeing what sticks. This is an important step, and it's an important step that you have to take. But what happens sometimes is people get a little bit too wrapped up in one or two things, and they try to specialize early. That can give you a ton of opportunity or time to get burnt out, to get thrown off course. We should continually kind of whittle away at what it is we specialize in. And then once we get to that specialization point, we are really saturated in our ability and we can really create efficiency with our time and our efforts. We don't detect the pace or the speed in which we travel at. We only detect the change the change in the rate of speed. And this is something where if we have to continuously start and stop or turn left then turn right, it's that change in rate or the change in direction that requires the most amount of energy and emotional effort and so on and so forth. So that is a quick path to getting burnt out. Now to the illusion of comfort. And here's where I will likely and honestly, hopefully kind of ruffle a little feathers. But the international word of 2020, 2021 being safe space without a doubt, I'm here to say fuck that. And I think that this is something that we have, it's becoming dangerous, to be honest with you. And I think that rather than emphasizing, kids especially, but kids, young adults, emphasizing improving their ability to be resilient and durable and having vigor and commitment, what we're doing is we're creating a false network of security to try to preserve our fatigue or preserve our fragility. And this is, again, just a very dangerous way of living because, like I said in the opening, it's not everyone else's responsibility to cater to your fragility or your, standard or expectation of things. It's your job to become more robust and resilient to the environment or to external input to where you're not so easily rattled. Our collective problem is not setting the bar too high and missing. Our collective problem is setting the bar too low and hitting dead on and then being fucking confused as to why nobody's happy or why nobody, has what they feel they deserve or are receiving what they feel their value is. But let me tell you, bell curves and averages and medians are bullshit. If you compare yourself to average, you're going to have a skewed reference, unless that's where you want to be. And if that's the case, again, you're probably not listening to a webinar like this, but there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just suggesting that for most people, that's a shitty way to live, and you're going to be here for about 80 years, and you're going to look back and go, well, goddamn, I didn't do anything that I wanted to do because I was too focused on just being comfortable along the way. We've heard it 1,000 times over, but a big part of life is just becoming more comfortable in a state of discomfort. For me, it's mundane things. It's personal conversation. It's forced conversation. It's having to do social events. I fucking hate them, but it's a part of the ride. So I've gotten better about dealing with it. But I'll tie this together with this. There are significant consequences to objectifying comfort and happiness. These are responsive emotions, meaning that you can't obtain them and you certainly can't pursue them because you have to do a bunch of things in order to open up the opportunity for those feelings to arise or become present. So this is another major error that we've made, and I think that striving for comfort or happiness is like the ultimate putting the cart before the horse. You're putting something out in front of you that you can't create, and you're going to skew the expectation spectrum of what happiness and comfort are if you're constantly trying to put it in front of you. I think it's important to look in the mirror before you look out the window, right? What can I do about the situation? Fuck what everybody else is going to do. Don't worry about what so-and-so has. Who cares what they say? What do you think? How do you feel? And most importantly, be your own fucking hero. Stop sitting around and waiting for everybody else to solve your goddamn problems. Go do something about it. A part of this 10-year plan for me has become, or has been becoming almost obsessively solutions-based. Fuck the problem, find the solution. What are my resources? What's my current situation? And how can I influence this situation or this outcome? If you can't, then figure something else out. If you can, start whittling away at it. But in either case, just do not be passive or indifferent to things and just expect everybody else to come in and save the day for you. The Defiant Ones is a phenomenal 4-part docuseries. I believe it's on Netflix. But it basically documents Jimmy Iovine, who's a bigwig in the Apple company, and a ton of musicians. Everybody from Eminem, NWA, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, all the way through to Bruce Springsteen and Lady Gaga and Stevie Nicks. I mean, there's literally a ton of people in there. But anyhow, that was an absolutely phenomenal docuseries and something that I try to watch once a year. And so this slide here is kind of a compository of what I took away from both that documentary and then also just what I've generally observed in those who I deem to be successful. And to start this out, one of my personal professional role models, Dr. Dre, very simple statement. You have to work very hard to get it and twice as hard to maintain it. And this is something that, I think I'm starting to understand a little bit more. Not that I've accomplished shit, but I've been working at a ravenous rate for a long time, and now I'm just finally starting to see some dividends on it. But 5 years ago, I thought that this was going to be the phase where I could kind of kick back, put my foot up. But no, it's quite the opposite. I'm actually having to do more or be more consistent with my efforts just to keep things as they are. But if we take a look at the traits here, the first one is confidence and belief. I think that the first thing that sticks out to me for those who are successful is that they have a resounding confidence and a tremendous belief in their abilities, irrespective of any point of their life. And for me, I look at arrogance as being heard and confidence as being felt. So being confident doesn't mean you need to be an asshole, and believing in yourself does not mean you need to have everybody else be a believer in you. These are intrinsic things. These are intrinsic traits that I think that are fundamental to becoming more successful. In addition to that, hardship and trauma are something that are very consistent. And there's just a very strong natural power in overcoming. And I think that, these are things that have a delayed return, but if you're going through some shit, if you're having a hard time, or if chips just haven't been falling your way, stay on course and keep your nose down, because eventually you will see the power in what you've been dealing with and what you've overcome. Successful individuals are principled and they're decisive. There's a very firm threshold on what they're willing to tolerate. And in addition to that, they are not going to waver on their decisions. They will not always be the right decisions, and they may be principled on some of the wrong things. However, it is, again, an intrinsic trait where they know exactly what they want, and they know exactly what they stand for, and they are going to go in this direction, and they're not going to look back or think twice on it. Successful individuals augment relationships. There is no such thing as self-made. That is a bunch of fucking garbage. So for any of us, we have to develop a very solid team around us, and we have to have people that are close in our lives that are not only, in support of our goals or our ambitions, but they also fundamentally provide value for you. And that's not that probably comes off a little bit more narcissistic than it's intended to be. But for me, it's, again, using Nicole. She doesn't bring value in the sense that she's teaching me biomechanics and she's teaching me training applications. She brings me value in the sense that when I get bent out of shape because the printer won't connect, she reminds me that, to calm the fuck down, and it's not that big of a deal. And those are fundamental. Outcast and outsiders. This is one that I know for a fact I can speak to. When I was, broke and fucked up and all depressed at 22, I remember distinctly looking out at other people and looking at things and just saying to myself, I want that shit right there. That's what I want for my life, and I'm not going to continue to put up with what I have going for myself. So it really does help to formulate your perspective. Then we have a certain level of defiance, and this is one that can be good and can be bad. But social construct tends to apply less to those who are successful, and this is different for everybody. You need to see where you have a little bit more gray area on social construct, but it should not just be as black and white as, oh, well, if everybody says that you have to do this, then I guess I have to do it that way. That's a bunch of shit. So, find your level of defiance. And then finally, you have to be a relentless worker, and you must be skilled. Everybody who's reached a level of success or platform in some way, shape, or form work their ass off for it, and they are skilled. You can only get so far without being good. So decision making is the ultimate linchpin to life. And learning the skills and nuances to becoming a better decision maker are fundamental. As we've established, decisions we make over the time that we're given equate to the person that we become and the mark that we're able to leave behind. But I think we overlook not only just the inner workings of decision making, but also the weight or magnitude of how we make our decisions. But I'll start here at the top. And this is a quote that I've heard within the last couple of years that really was profound for me. And that is, make your decisions or they will be made for you. You don't want to become the consequence of someone else's thinking, and you don't want to live your life building somebody else's dream. It's a necessary step in the equation, but you don't want that to be the ultimate outcome. So with this, we need to be directional, and we need to be intentional. And you're better off being wrong than you are indecisive, in my mind. Or to put it another way, you're better being a fuck up than a bench warmer. So if we do nothing else, just make a decision and keep moving. Because indecision or passivity will be the kryptonite for development. And ultimately, this leads to discretion lies at the foot of ownership. We are ultimately all navigating our way to three things, and those three things are freedom and or autonomy, the ability of choice or having discretion, and value, or whether that be self-worth or value to others. But these three things, which we can kind of collectively tie into ownership, should be strong motivators for you. My goal is 45. By 45, I want to be able to do whatever the hell I want, whenever I want, and I don't want to have approval or permission from anybody. And so right now, I am again starting to filter in different things or strategies to see that through. But you want to make sure that your decision making is logical, rational, and again, objective. leading with emotion on decision making is rarely a good thing. As we go along, we become more responsible for the decisions that we make. So it's expected of you to have less poor decisions as you go along, or the more decisions that you make. All right, so now for the fun part or segment of this webinar, and we're going to take a pretty deep look at time and time efficiency here. And for those of you who know me on a personal level, you know that I've had an everlasting fascination with the mechanism of time, really, and it's just a wild concept to me. But starting out here to the right, we all get the same 24. So what creates difference or separation, and how do people separate themselves from the pack? So hypothetically for this, if we just assume that everybody spends about 8 hours at work and they spend about 8 hours sleeping, that means about 2/3 of our day look identical. So how are you spending the other 8? And this is really where, significance, priority, and discipline start to materialize. Very simply, how fucking bad do you want it? But if you think that showing up to work on time and leaving work on time will get you ahead, again, you better have some strong genetics. So let's take a look at this here, and we break this down on priorities ranging from low, moderate, high to significant, and then the amount of time corresponding being 30, 60, or 90 minutes or 2 hours. So if we spend 30 minutes a day on something, which is a very reasonable expectation, that gives us about 3.5 hours a week, about 14 per month, and about 168 per year. Down on the high end for significant priority, 2 hours a day, which is definitely a little bit more difficult to maintain. That gives us about 14 hours a week, 56 per month, and about 672 per year. But 672 hours a year is significant. That is a lot of time. And you can see how just, even just a marginal or a modest investment on something can accumulate rather quickly. But this is the fundamental difference. Again, if we all have the same, dedication for 2/3 of our day, that last third is where you're going to make your mark. So for me, and we'll talk more about this in a second, but something I've subscribed to for the last couple of years now has been plus 90, right? So from Monday to Friday, I try to aim for plus 90 every night in the office. That gives me about 10.5 hours a week, about 42 per month, and about 500 per year. Over time, this can start to create tangible and visible separation. You can start to see things going better for yourself if you can be consistent with this. Then we look at our weekend bonus. And the weekends are the premier time for you to exclusively pursue passions or projects, your side hustle, developing multiple revenue streams, developing skill sets. But the weekend is not something to kind of salvage yourself with, right? Like we see these people who are, oh, thank God it's Friday, or the weekend wasn't long enough. I mean, that type of shit just makes me want to punch people in the throat, to be honest with you. But this is a sacred time where you can, depending on your situation, catch up and get back to equilibrium on things that you're deficient at or things that you've dropped the ball on. Like I mentioned, this is an opportune time to get ahead and start to develop some things that make a difference or matter to you. But this should not be viewed as passive time or, quote unquote downtime or hanging out, doing things. Look, this isn't to say that you need to become a complete recluse and cut everybody off, like I happen to do. But in either case, whether it's work related or whether it's just, your general life, you want to make sure that the time you're spending is meaningful. So again, we want to be selective with our company, be selective with our environments. You want to dedicate time to loved ones, to pets, to your close friends and family. But this is also a good opportunity for you to spend some personal time, and you shouldn't have any reservations on that. So if we look at our exponential rates here, if we just simply spend 4 hours on something per weekend, so 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday, we're going to look at about 16 per month, which is about 192 per year. So that's novel, but I would say that that's a low priority. Coming down to the high end, if we spend 8 and 8, which is definitely a significant time investment, but we see that that creates 64 hours a month, 768 per year. So that's again another one that is going to accumulate quickly. With me right now, I'm probably hovering right around here. I'm between here and here on most weekends, but I spend a lot of time, with 16-hour weekends just on personal projects or productivity. Where this all stems from is the 10,000 hour theory. And I know that this is one that a lot of people love to shit on, but I'll tell you what, this is something that is very meaningful to me and something that I truly believe in. So don't bring any shit talk my way on this one, I promise you. But this is from a book, Outliers, by Malcolm Gladwell. And this is one of very few books that fundamentally and instantly changed my life. I mean, this changed the way that I view shit. But the concept of the 10,000 hour theory is very simple. It's the amount of time that you put into something will create, pretty much equal and opposite return. And in order to reach a level of mastery, you need to have about 10,000 hours of concentrated time on something. So in a realistic sense, we're only going to accumulate 10,000 hours of true concentrated time on maybe 2 or 3 different things throughout the course of our life. But again, this is something that I take in concept, not in stone. So I constantly try to perceive things as, okay, if I can accumulate X amount of time, then I will likely be in this or that position, or at least better off than where I'm at. And ultimately, this just keeps me committed to what I love and what I want to do. But I think that, we need to, again, see these things as priorities. And for all intents and purposes, the better part of my last 10 years, my professional career has been a significant priority. And it equates again to about 2 hours per day for 5 days a week and about 16-hour weekends. That means that I'm accumulating about 1,440 hours per year. And if we divide that by 10,000 hours, in theory, that would mean that I would need about 7 years to reach that 10,000 hour mark or mastery. If we have a low priority, for comparison, 30 minutes a day, 4 hours per weekend, that's going to be about 360 hours per year, which means that it would take us about 28 years to reach a level of mastery. So because I fucked up so many things at 23, I always just felt that I did not have the privilege of looking at things as anything other than significant priorities. I had to bust my ass. So because I was having to, double back and go back through school, still working 55-hour weeks and still, trying to kind of just get my general life in order, I knew for a while there that sleep was just not going to be a luxury for me. And for about 4 or 5 years, I was following a routine of not sleeping 3 nights per week. I was staying up on Monday nights, Wednesday nights, and Friday nights or Saturday nights. And that's where I was covering the deficit of accumulating the time needed to pursue mastery. Now I'm fortunately in a position where I'm not having to pull all-nighters anymore. Health has obviously become much more of a focus or concentration being on this side of 30. But I did it. I got that time in when I knew that I could take those risks, and I knew that I had, the biological or the metabolic resiliency to be able to push like that. Now I know that I can't. So I've modified and adapted. But again, case in point, you have to make the most of wherever you are with what you have. And this is one of the quotes from Outliers that really stuck out to me, and that is, "He who rises before the sun 360 days a year does not see his family go hungry." I believe it's actually an ancient Chinese proverb, but that's one that is objectively simple as it can be. If you get up, if you get after it, you bust your ass, and you just work very hard at what you do, you ain't going to be hungry. And I would take it a step further in saying that problems will start to resolve themselves if you can maintain that level of ferocity with what you do. So this is basically what my general week to week looks like now. And again, down here, my inherent goals at the present moment are to maintain plus 90 minutes, really 4 weekdays. There's going to be one day usually per week. Sometimes it's Monday, sometimes it's Friday, and sometimes it just happens where I'm just tired and I need to shut it down, and that's okay. And then, like I mentioned, I'm shooting for about 16 hours on the weekends. But think about your weekly schedule like that old science demonstration that we've all seen with the big rocks, small rocks, and sand in a jar. And if you fill the jar first with sand and then you put the small rocks in, the big rocks aren't going to be able to fit, right? So this just suggests that priority matters. And the way I look at it is priority governs order. So our big rocks are going to go first, and then we'll fill in on the back end with some of the smaller rocks. And then with what room we have left, we'll drop the sand in. So I look at that almost as like identifying what you have to do, your big rocks, what you want to do, your little rocks, and then what you can do, your sand or your pebbles. So for the sake of this, if we look at the week here, I know that from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, I'm going to be on the floor at VHP. It's gridlocked. Same thing in the afternoons, 12 to 4 on the floor. So that's 8 hours per day where my time is dedicated and I don't have anything to say, or I don't have any say in the matter. In between time, so from 10 to 12, this is where for me, because I'm getting up at 5 every day, I have to get my lift in, I have to get my emails knocked out, I have to make phone calls, whatever it may be, but that 10 to 12 window in the middle of my days are critical, and I need to make sure that I can't get lazy during those, because then it starts to permeate down into the evening hours or perhaps even into the weekends. The lifting aspect or the training aspect is that health piece that we spoke about, but just because you're pushing it or just because you're really trying to do grandiose things, it does not mean you negate your health. The first thing that I do every day when I come home is I shut it down for about an hour. So from about 4:30 to 5:30, I'm just sitting down, watching something stupid on TV, hanging out with the dogs, taking a shower, just relaxing. But then I come back up and get into the office. And so from about 6 to 7:30 on each given night, I'm just doing something. Now, let me be very clear. I shoot for plus 90. Some days it's a little bit shorter. Some days it's a little bit longer. But the concept remains. Sometimes I'm productive. Sometimes I'm not. But again, the concept remains that this is just a part of what I do. This is one of my little rocks that I know I need to stay on top of these things and continuously chip away at it. And then I'm down every night. Honestly, more as of late, probably closer to 9:30. But I'm sound asleep every night by 10, no questions asked. So when I wake up in the morning, even though I fucking hate it, I wake up feeling recharged. On Fridays, I get a little bit of an extended window in the office, but again, that is if I'm feeling up for it and if I'm, in a state where I'm feeling like I'm actually going to cover some ground. And then this is where I really make my mark. Saturdays are a big day for me, and I'll tell you a very quick story. Nicole and I have a unique arrangement when it comes to family events and social things, and God bless her, man. She's just been so compatible for me. But I don't, when I have to do these things, when I have to do birthdays, when I have to do dinners, or when I have to do holiday stuff, it is perceived as an impediment to me, because I know that a Saturday for me is equal to quite a bit of production time. So what we agreed to about 2 years ago, because we were having some difficulty with this, is that we would drive separate to most family gatherings or most events. And the reason for that is she loves spending time with her family and with our family. And again, I do, but I also have some other things that I'm committed to. So us driving separately, I give them 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then I wrap up and I head back and I get back to it. But it doesn't pressure her into feeling like she has to pick or choose between leaving and staying, and it avoids any kind of conflict for us. So although that may be objectively weird for some people, that is one that, has been very successful for us and helped me quite a bit, because again, these Saturdays for me are instrumental. So I have a couple of clients in the mornings, and then, I'll shut it down from about 11 to 1. And then, I'm back up in the office really from about 1 in the afternoon to somewhere around midnight, 1 a.m. Granted, this is on a 90 on, 30 off schedule. So, I'm not sitting here glued into a chair for 12 hours uninterrupted. It is up and out, up and down, back and forth. I'll go outside, do some shit in the yard, come back in, but again, all in all, we're trying to get as much done on Saturdays as we can. Same thing on Sundays. I'll start out, we go for a walk, we spend time with the dogs, some family time, get breakfast. This is my dedicated reading allotment. And then from, about 11 to 3 or 11 to 4 is where I'm going to get all of my procedural stuff done for the week. So all of my VHP stuff, my notes, my training programs, all of our Rude Rock programming, any social media posts, all that stuff, I just knock it out on Sunday. So then that way it's not a thought during the week. And then from, 3 p.m. Onward, obviously this time of year, that is football time, that is sacred time. Nothing in the world will cause me to miss a Raider game. But I'm just relaxing, kind of unwinding, journaling, and then really, on Sundays, we're probably getting down closer to 9 or 9:30. But this is how it looks for me, and this has been highly sustainable. And it's, again, this is something that I know is going to continue to change. It looked wildly different when I was 24. It's going to look wildly different when I'm 44, but this is where I'm at now. And I think for the sake of you, it's just at least important to analyze it and see what you can do and see how you can modify your schedule to where you can create some routine and some habitual nature to how you're doing things and making sure that, where you're dedicating your time is well spent. Coming down the stretch here, whether you are truly incapable or unable to do something, or rather you're just really unwilling to do it. So with inability, we're thinking about frustration. We feel vulnerable. We're intimidated. We're trying to identify where our limitation or restriction is. Whereas with unwillingness, it's simply just passive or lazy. We're indifferent to things. Things just don't seem to matter. It doesn't really matter if it's this or if it's that. I think those are generally just facades for what is truly inability. Now, it's okay to be unwilling, and it's okay to just very simply be indifferent to something or just not have enough interest to be motivated to do it. So please don't misconstrue the point. But when it comes to shit that matters, we need to look at it as, am I truly unable or unable to do something, or am I unwilling to do it? With inability, we have resource barriers, information barriers, or physical barriers, very simply. And those kind of correlating to, I don't have what I need, I don't understand this, or I can't do this. But what's important with inability is that you need to keep breaking it down more and more and more until you can get it to a succinct point where you can at least provide explanation for yourself. So if you don't have what you need to figure out how to obtain those materials, or modify what you believe is needed. So to use myself with this back, again, taking you back to 22, 23 time frame, I didn't have shit because all of my bills were cut off. I didn't have cable. I didn't have, any kind of subscriptions or Netflix or any of these things, right? So I was able to just steal Wi-Fi from one of my neighbors, and I had a notebook and I had a ton of thought and emotion that was bubbling up to the surface. So the resources that I felt I needed at the time, I really didn't, because I had an opportunity to express thought and emotion, and then that formulated into something else. The information barrier, if you have a Wi-Fi connection in today's age, you really don't have an excuse because you can figure it out. So examine the sources, and then from there, just have conversations with people. Find people who are better than you at what you do and figure out how they do it. Take it, apply it, and then refine it and make it your own. I can't do this is a very, very, very selective statement for me. Very rarely is something truly an incapability in the sense that you physically do not have the ability to do something. So what you need to do here is break up your workload, put it into incremental, manageable pieces that you can work towards consistently. So we go back to our time graphs or our time efficiency graphs, and we see that, you may be only able to withstand something for 20, 30-minute intervals at a time. But if you do those 20, 30-minute intervals over and over and over and over again, eventually that becomes meaningful time. With unwillingness, we're thinking apathy, defiance, and lack of incentive. And obviously defiance being in not as much of a flattering term as it was a couple of slides ago. But with apathy, I don't feel like it. Well, if you're feeling apathetic or you're lacking drive, welcome to the club. That literally occurs for everybody. But what you're trying to do is not necessarily abstain from that feeling or sensation. Your goal is to try to reduce the amount of frequency and or magnitude that you feel lazy or like a piece of shit and not doing anything. I don't want to. Again, this is, taking it in a specific context, but you need to evaluate what you have going on for yourself. And then what is this effort versus outcome ratio? Remember that everything is voluntary. So what you do needs to be meaningful enough to you and then valuable enough to others so that it creates a sense of vigor, or it creates a sense of passion for what you're spending your time on. And then finally, the lack of incentive. Is this a short-term or long-term thing? Are there different options? Are there alternative routes that lead to same destinations? Is this something that's feeding into a bigger goal or opportunity for you? But the lack of incentive sometimes is just your view on the matter and you not looking at it in a way in which it creates benefit or value to you. So perspective is heavily involved in that part of it as well. So now to kind of give you some strategies here to start rounding this out, starting with the quote in the top right. This is a very powerful quote from one of my personal heroes, I guess, Alan Watts. But he said, "Being is not something into which we become, but out of which we proceed." And what I think he's meaning by this is that what's done is done. It is what it is, and we are where we are. So the more time that we spend focused or concentrated on, what we feel has happened to us, or what we feel we came up short on, or what we feel, was a difficult time, it really doesn't matter. It only matters as much as you put attention to it, And if we look at this as being something out of which we proceed, that is looking at life in a sense that I'm going to take every strand and fiber of my ability and my volition, and I'm going to continue forward the best that I can, or in the best way that I know how. And for me, that's something that was, resounding, and I think has helped me to not be so loathing or so, regretful or bitter about shit that's happened in the past. We just got to pick it up and roll, man. It is what it is. But beyond that, assessing honestly is again going to be the critical first step in all of this. We talked about it, but you need to remain objective with this. You need to remain impartial. Although follow your heart is a great concept, or bumper sticker really, you need to consider what you're good at and let that start to lead the way, and then just see how you can help others as you're going along. And I promise you that will provide a greater sense of value. Absolutely understand that you need help. Establish a very strong team. Your 3 to 5 closest people should be fucking rock stars, and they should provide senses of value for you and support for you, just as you do for others. But this will help you to become more resourceful. You will open yourself up to new opportunities, new relationships, new investments, and so on and so forth. But having a strong team is quintessential. Just because we have people to give us input and feedback doesn't mean we always need to adopt it. I think to always be receptive, but don't always take it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But be able to discern, good versus bad input and things that maybe just don't apply to you. And taking one from one of my, professional role models, Mike Boyle here, steal good shit from smart people. I know it sounds silly, but I heard him say that in one of the first presentations I ever went to, and that shit changed me. I was very apprehensive to look at the way other people were doing things, and when he said it so bluntly like that, I was like, you know what, he's right. So everything that I've done since is something that I've adopted or modified from somebody else. Boundaries, as this is advice coming from an extremist, so take it with an asterisk, but you need to figure out, to a degree, what your extremes look like. What is your ultimate high? What is your ultimate low? And then where do you fluctuate on more of a day-to-day? But if you don't understand what those polarities look like, then it's pretty difficult to create an honest reference for yourself. You'll think that you're tired or fatigued when you're not. You'll think that you've done everything that you could do when you haven't. You'll think that you've gone as far as you can when you have not. So you need to test those waters and flirt with the polarities of things. But the further that you push, ultimately, the deeper you commit to it. So nobody ever made it living big, by living in the middle. Lastly, the vision piece is something that, I think for me has been most prominent in recent years, but I'm very open and I'm very, very transparent about my goals and where I'm going to be going. And this needs to come with an uncompromising and unapologetic demeanor. This is what the fuck I'm going to do. And I'm not willing to compromise on that, and I'm not willing to bend on that much. And for me, I think aim high and just make shit happen. Let everything else fall for itself. Let everything else, kind of figure itself out. You're just aiming for exactly what you want and just go get it. Be firm with your decisions, and then how you spend your time will reveal what it means to you. So if you sit back and tell yourself that you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be an astronaut or whatever, but you spend your time watching bullshit reality TV shows and eating chips on the couch, then you really don't want that shit. So above all else, make sure that you stay hungry and stay curious and do not fucking settle for anything or for anyone. They need to adapt to what you see for yourself, and you will reciprocate that for them as in their dreams and ambitions as well. A couple of quotes here. The first one is from a gentleman named Bobby Hurley Sr., who is one of the winningest basketball coaches of all time, and one of very few high school basketball coaches to be inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame. But he won over 1,000 games throughout his career, which included 26 state championships in 39 years, which is pretty goddamn wild. But during his induction ceremony, his Hall of Fame induction, he had a very poignant quote that had resonated with me at the time. And again, very simply, he was recounting a story where a coach was asking him what his secret was. What did you do? How did you get to that many wins? And he just looked at him and he said, "Well, I've never owned golf clubs." Yeah, this is another one that I'm probably not going to be in the populace on, but golf looks fucking stupid to me. I've never played it. I don't have any interest in playing it, and it's pretty much equally the same for all hobbies. I think it's important to have things that are non-work related and things that you can divest your time into that are spiritually powerful, that are intrinsically or intuitively powerful for you. But I think that we've gotten a little bit out over the top with like trying to fill slots with different hobbies and different things that we can do that again occupy our time. So maybe it's just me and Bobby, but I'll never own golf clubs either. And then here's one from Jimmy Iovine, and to kind of summarize this, just pick up and go. When as he says it, when you're a racehorse, there's a reason that they put blinders on you, and it's if you're always looking left and right and you're trying to figure out what people think or how they feel about your situation, you're gonna miss a step, and you're gonna get past. And when we as humans are trying to accomplish something, especially early on, it's important that you put these blinders on and you just put your head down and you fucking work, and let yourself make mistakes. That's another impediment that a lot of people have, or a delayed start, because they're fearful of making errors or fucking up along the way. But that's just a part of it, and it's going to continue to happen. So it's not something that should be looked at as something to avoid or try to mitigate. Just let it occur, get through it, and go through it. But if you don't have a robust amount of experience, it's difficult for you to have reference, and then you have trouble relating to people, and you have difficulty with social navigations because you've never done anything in your life. So don't be afraid of the mistakes. Don't be hesitant, and don't look at it as how you're doing in other people's view. Look at it as, I'm just going to go as hard as I can and push myself, or go as far as I can with what I have, and then I'll look at everything else when I'm done. But as long as you can maintain, without egregious error or without, egregious consequence, no harm, no foul, man. Just keep it pushing. And I wanted to finish it out here with this one, and that is that there is no backside to life. One thing that bothers me, actually, let me start it with this. One of my biggest motivators in my adult life, and this again reflects back to the early phase for me at like 23. I had a nightmare one night that I woke up and I was 47. That was the nightmare. It was just being in a very average, comfortable, mediocre state of life at a very mediocre age, with all of the assumed novelties of family life and adulthood, and it scared the shit out of me. So I made it a concerted pact at the time to myself that I would rather be dead than average, and I still to this day thoroughly mean that. I'm not here to just go through motions. I'm not here to just check boxes and do what I'm supposed to do. I want to push as hard as I fucking can for as long as I can, because the ultimate key to your existence, to my existence, is the impression or the impact that is left behind when we are no longer here. And I feel as if the harder that I push myself and the more that I'm able to accomplish in the short time that I do have here, the more reach I will be able to have after the fact for that many more people. And that is very, very important to me. So it frustrates me when I hear people in their 40s or their 50s, just kind of saying things like, well, if I could go back and blah, 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 or if I didn't have the kids or if I didn't have this, then I would be able to do that. And, I'm too old to go do X, Y, or Z. And it's just a bunch of shit, man. It's a bad way to see things. So for me, I look at everything in a decade's fashion. So for my 20s, it was very simply get my shit together phase. Everything was scattered, scrambled. I was, a master of destruction and devastation. And so for the better part of, my whole entire 20s, it was just that reparations or repairing phase. Things have obviously settled down a bit for me now and become much more copacetic, but now I'm in this kind of ambiguous understanding phase. I want to understand myself. I want to understand my wife. I want to understand my dogs, my friends, my family, and then my craft. And I want to do everything that I can in the interim to contribute to my family, my friends, my work, my employers. I have a tremendous sense of commitment to Alex and BHP, and I truly want to do everything that I can for them before I move on to my next step. But understanding is the current phase. 40s is going to be the NFL for me, and that's where I'm heading. That's my next step, and the ultimate goal being the Las Vegas Raiders. So for me, I am pursuing the NFL because I think that it's the environment that is meant for me. I think that it's going to be a tremendous opportunity to raise a family in that environment. And despite being fired every 2 years and moved all over the country a few times, I think that it's going to be a great experience for me to see some different things and see some different people. I've lived in Virginia all 31 years of my life. So I'm actually looking forward to being bounced around to a few teams, but that will be, kind of my marquee step in terms of my professional development. Then in my 50s, I want to, once I get fired from the Raiders, I want to step back for a couple of years and I want to go do whatever the hell I want to do for a couple of years. Take some time and go see some things and, spend dedicated time with the family. All have been abused and, gone so long from home during my time in the NFL that I want to double back and make sure, I spend some time with them. Then I'll go grab a PhD and I want to get into lecturing. So my ultimate goal has always been 30 and 30 years of coaching on the floor and then 30 years of lecturing at a university. In my 60s, we're going to open up the Rude Rock facility. So this will finally be our physical in-person facility. And, obviously there's still a lot of time left for details on this one, but that will be the marquee feature of my 60s. In my 70s, I want to, kind of just travel around and help mentor in any way that I can for anybody and do some consulting and try to just leave a thumbprint on as many different, organizations and companies as I can. Then in my 80s, I'm going to go back and document it. I want to have, basically 5 decades worth of analog notes of what I've learned and taken and contributed to the strength and conditioning and human performance industry, and both in the professional athlete sense and in the military special operator sense. And then in my 90s, kind of starting to come down the stretch there, despite the fact that with advances in technology and modern medicine, I'm aiming for like 170, 160 right now. So we'll see. But as it sits currently, 90s will be my philanthropy work. So that's where I want to just go, again, kind of travel around and meet new people and just give away anything I can or give away what I have. But doing so with the intent of helping somebody else start their climb, because I know what it felt like at 21, 22, 23 to be, fucked up and have nothing around me and have no resources or nothing to rely on to initiate my climb, I want to make sure that I can take that away from as many people as I can and give them a better platform to start on, so that when they go through their career and they go through their life, their endpoint is higher than the one that I finished at. And that is another one that is very sincere to me. But ultimately, however it breaks down for you, and with wherever you are or wherever you're at in life, have a distinct vision of what you see for yourself. Understand the skills that you have and how those can impact or influence others, and just keep going. Don't ever stop. Don't ever settle. You have to see this as a continual rise, and you are trying to peak literally by your deathbed. You are trying to be as good as you can possibly be before you transition on and move into whatever this crazy ass universe has for us next. If you all made it through that, I sincerely thank you. That, again, obviously was not the typical technical X's and O's type of shit, but that there was a lot that I wanted to get off of my chest. Perhaps it was even a slight catharsis for me with this webinar, but hopefully that was helpful for you, and I was able to share some things that were tangible for you. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or if you're somebody who just, if you're going through some shit, you're having a rough time, and there's anything that myself or Nicole or the Rude Rock organization can do for you to help, please reach out to us. We're always here and willing to do whatever we can. But at the end of the day, understand that it's your path and it's your compass, and you need to take a tremendous sense of responsibility in that. And you need to take some pride in that, and then you need to be willing to do what it takes to get to where you want to go with what you have. You can be consistent. I promise you, you will shock the shit out of yourself with what you're able to accomplish.